The lawyer slid the envelope across the desk like it weighed nothing, but the second I touched it, my hands started shaking. "I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Carter," he said gently. I nodded like I'd been nodding for the past 3 days, like I understood what loss even meant anymore. My parents died 2 weeks apart. Car accident, black ice, rural highway outside Toledo. One moment I was ignoring my mom's third voicemail about Sunday dinner, the next I was identifying their bodies under fluorescent lights. Now I was sitting in a beige office that smelled like old paper and lemon cleaner, waiting to find out what was left of the life I grew up in. "There wasn't much in liquid assets," the lawyer continued carefully. "No substantial savings. The house still has a mortgage." That didn't surprise me. My parents were never flashy, never wealthy. Dad worked manufacturing his whole life. Mom taught second grade for 28 years. "We did find one property," he added carefully. I looked up. "Property?" He adjusted his glasses and opened a file. "A warehouse, industrial zoning, west side of the city." I blinked. "A warehouse?" "Yes, it's been in your father's name for about 12 years. 12 years? I'd never heard a word about it. "Is it worth anything?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. "Structurally questionable. It's been vacant for some time. There are back taxes owed." Of course there were. "So they left me debt," I said flatly. "They left you ownership," he corrected softly. "Ownership of a run-down industrial building in a neighborhood that had been decaying since I was in middle school." I let out a hollow laugh. "That sounds like my dad," I muttered, "always buying broken things." The lawyer slid a key across the desk. It was old, heavy, rust along the edges. "He specified that you received this personally." Something about that made my throat tighten. Not the property, the fact that he'd planned it. He'd known. He'd chosen. I drove to the warehouse that afternoon. The west side hadn't improved since I was a kid. Boarded storefronts, graffiti layered over graffiti, streetlights flickering even in daylight. The warehouse stood at the end of a dead-end street. Brick exterior, faded paint, broken windows patched with plywood. It looked abandoned enough to be condemned. "This is what you left me?" I whispered to no one. I stepped out of the car slowly. The air smelled like rust and rain. The large metal door had a heavy chain wrapped around it, but the padlock was new, not rusted, new. That made my stomach flip. If it was vacant for years, who replaced the lock? I swallowed and slid the key in. It turned smoothly, too smoothly. The chain fell away with a heavy metallic clang that echoed down the empty street. For a second, I considered getting back in my car, selling it unseen, letting a developer deal with whatever disaster waited inside. But something about the new lock, something about the way the lawyer emphasized personally. I pulled the metal door upward. It groaned loudly, dust shaking loose as light poured inside. And I froze. Because it wasn't empty, not even close. The warehouse floor was spotless, polished concrete, industrial lighting hanging overhead. Neatly arranged work tables lined the center of the space, metal shelves along the walls, equipment, computers, boxes labeled carefully. This wasn't abandoned. This was active. My heart began to pound. What the hell? I stepped inside slowly. The air smelled clean, conditioned, not mildew. Someone had been here recently, very recently. A row of sewing machines sat along a table, industrial grade, new. Opposite them, bolts of fabric stacked by color and texture, leather, canvas, denim, custom tags with branding I didn't recognize. Carter Supply Co. Carter. My last name. My knees felt weak. My dad worked manufacturing his whole life. Textiles, uniforms. He used to come home with fabric samples in his lunchbox when I was a kid, but he retired 5 years ago, or so I thought. I walked deeper into the warehouse, my footsteps echoing. In the far corner, there was an office enclosed in glass walls. Lights were on. On. I hadn't turned them on. I moved slowly toward it, pulse roaring in my ears. Through the glass, I saw a desk, a laptop, a framed photo of me, recent, not childhood. Me at 32 at a charity gala last year. I hadn't given them that photo. My breath caught. "Hello?" I called out. Silence answered. But then, a soft mechanical hum started somewhere overhead. The lights brightened. A screen on the far wall flickered to life. I turned slowly toward it. Security camera footage. Live. Showing me standing in the center of the warehouse. A delayed version of myself staring back. I stumbled backward. "Okay," I whispered. "This isn't normal." Then a voice filled the warehouse. Calm, male, familiar. Emerson. I stopped breathing. Dad. It was his voice, pre-recorded. I looked around wildly, speakers hidden somewhere above. "If you're hearing this," the voice continued, steady and clear, "it means your mother and I didn't make it back from that trip." My chest tightened so painfully I thought I'd collapse. "This building isn't debt, it's opportunity." My vision blurred. "You always thought I stopped building things when I retired. I didn't. I just stopped building for someone else." The screen shifted. Blueprints appeared. Brand designs, financial projections. Carter Supply Co. "This is yours," he said. "It always was." I sank on one of the metal chairs, shaking. "You once told me you hated your corporate job, that you felt like you were selling pieces of yourself for a paycheck." I had said that, drunk on wine in their kitchen 2 years ago. He'd listened quietly. I thought he'd forgotten. So I started the foundation, quietly, legally, cleanly. The screen displayed contracts, wholesale accounts, orders, large ones, pending shipments. "You have clients waiting," he said. "Real ones." My pulse spiked. Clients? This wasn't a dream. This was operational. "You'll find passwords in the desk, inventory lists, vendor contacts, everything you need." The screen paused briefly. His voice softened. "I didn't leave you money," he admitted. "I left you leverage." I let out a broken laugh through tears. That's such a dad thing to say. "If you walk away," he said, "the building will be sold to settle taxes. If you stay, you'll see what your name can mean." The recording ended. Silence rushed back in, but it wasn't empty anymore. It felt charged, alive. I stood slowly and walked into the glass office. The laptop was open, logged in. A spreadsheet filled the screen. Projected revenue for the next 6 months. 6 figures. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. This wasn't a hobby project. This was a launch. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I nearly screamed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" A woman's voice responded briskly. "Carter Supply?" My throat grew dry. "Yes. We've been trying to confirm next week's shipment. Is everything on schedule?" "Shipment? Next week? On schedule?" I looked out at the rows of equipment, at the ready materials. My heart pounded so hard I felt dizzy. "Who is this?" I asked carefully. "Monroe Tactical," she replied. "We have a contract." Tactical? My stomach flipped. I opened the spreadsheet again. Client list. Monroe Tactical, custom field jackets, 4,000 units. Field jackets? Military grade? Police? Private contractors? My dad had built something far bigger than I imagined. "Yes," I heard myself say, slowly. "Good," she replied curtly. "Delay penalties are steep." The line clicked dead. I stood there shaking. Opportunity, or something I didn't fully understand. I walked back into the main warehouse floor. The machines, the fabric, the scale. He'd built this quietly for years. For me. But why keep it secret? Why not tell me? And why tactical contracts? Dad wasn't political. He wasn't extreme. He was practical. The glass office door creaked slightly behind me. I spun around. No one there, just my reflection. But something felt off. I scanned the warehouse again, and then I noticed something I hadn't before. Near the back wall, a second metal door, smaller, unmarked, half hidden behind shelving. My pulse quickened. It hadn't been in the initial view when I walked in. I approached slowly. There was no lock, just a keypad. Why would a run-down warehouse need a secured internal door? I wiped my sweaty palms on my jeans.
My hands were still shaking when I pulled open the desk drawer. Inside, everything was organized with surgical precision: labeled folders, flash drives, a leather-bound notebook with my father's handwriting pressed deep into the cover. Emerson. Not business plan, not warehouse. My name. My throat tightened. I opened it. The first page wasn't numbers, it was a date. 3 years ago. Emerson said she feels invisible at work, said she builds things for people who will never know her name. I sucked in a sharp breath. I remembered that night. I'd been frustrated, half drunk, complaining about corporate clients who took credit for my design strategies. He'd been quiet, just nodding. He was writing. The next pages were progress logs, equipment purchased, suppliers vetted, prototype samples tested. Then photos. Photos of jackets, heavy-duty field gear, clean lines, functional design. Under each photo, notes in my father's messy handwriting. E would fix this seam. She hates bulky shoulders. She'd streamline this pocket. He wasn't just building a company, he was building it around me. I flipped further. There were contracts outlined, payment schedules, names of companies I vaguely recognized from government subcontracting headlines. My pulse ticked faster. Why tactical gear? Why not retail, fashion, corporate uniforms? Then I saw it. A clipped newspaper article taped inside. Supply chain shortages in emergency response departments. Local agencies struggling to source durable cold-weather gear. Dad had highlighted a line. Small manufacturers could fill the gap if willing to take on specialty contracts. He'd circled it in red. I swallowed. He hadn't built something shady, he'd built something necessary. But still, he'd hidden it. Why? I stood abruptly and walked back toward the keypad door. The notebook felt heavier in my hands now. The last page had something different. Not handwriting, a printed code. Underneath, in pen, "For when you're ready." My heartbeat thundered. I stared at the keypad. Enter code. My fingers hovered. Then I typed the numbers. For a split second, nothing happened. Then, a soft mechanical click. The door unlocked. The air inside was cooler, darker. I pushed it open slowly. Lights flickered on automatically, and I froze. It wasn't storage. It wasn't inventory. It was another room the size of a small apartment. Finished walls, hardwood flooring, a couch, a kitchenette, a bed in the corner. Personal space. Hidden inside an industrial warehouse? "What is this?" I whispered. It looked lived in, neatly, not abandoned. I stepped inside carefully. There were framed photos on a shelf. My parents, me, but recent ones, taken from angles that suggested distance. Candids, at a coffee shop, at the park, outside my apartment building. My skin went ice cold. These weren't photos I'd sent them. They were photos taken of me, without me knowing. My breathing turned shallow. No, no, no. I grabbed one frame. It was from last fall. I was sitting alone on a bench scrolling my phone. The angle was far away, zoomed in. My father's voice echoed in my mind from the recording. I built the foundation quietly. Quietly. How quietly? I spun slowly in the room. On the small desk near the bed was another laptop, closed. Beside it, a file labeled Observation. My stomach twisted violently. I opened it. Inside were printed pages, dates, times, notes. Emerson appears exhausted, possible signs of burnout. Still staying late at work despite complaints. Does not appear to be eating regularly. I staggered back. He'd been watching me, tracking me, monitoring my life. There were dozens of entries, years of them, not just business planning, personal surveillance. Why would you do this? I whispered. Tears blurred my vision again, but this time they felt different. Not warmth, not gratitude. Something colder, something unsettled. My phone buzzed. I flinched hard enough to drop the folder. Same unknown number as before. I hesitated, then answered. Yes? Silence for 2 seconds. Then a male voice, low, calm. You found the back room. My blood ran cold. Who is this? You don't recognize my voice? I swallowed. No. A soft exhale. Your father was thorough. My pulse spiked. Where are you? Close enough. I spun toward the warehouse floor instinctively. Empty. You need to leave, he continued calmly. Excuse me, before you decide to take over. Anger flared through the fear. This is my property. Yes, he said evenly. That's the problem. My grip tightened on the phone. What do you mean? There was a pause. Then, Carter Supply isn't just jackets. My heart skipped. What does that mean? It means your father had partners. Partners? The word echoed ominously. He didn't tell you everything. Who are you? I demanded again. Someone who invested. Ice flooded my veins. Invested how? In ways that expect returns. My gaze snapped to the warehouse floor. The equipment, the pending shipments, Monroe Tactical. Delay penalties are steep. This is a legitimate business, I said firmly. It is, he replied smoothly, but it's also leveraged. Leveraged how? Another pause. Then, debt. My stomach dropped. Your father borrowed heavily to scale. That didn't match the neat spreadsheets, the clean projections. You're lying. No, he said calmly. He was brilliant, but ambitious. I felt dizzy. He believed you would grow it fast enough to outrun your obligations. Obligations? What obligations? I whispered. Silence again. Then his voice lowered. Some clients don't tolerate failure. The line went dead. My hand fell slowly to my side. The room felt smaller. The observation notes scattered at my feet. The photos. The contracts. Had my father built me a launch pad or a trap? I walked back out into the main warehouse slowly. Everything looked different now. The clean machines, the organized shelves. Opportunity or liability? I looked up at the ceiling. Small black domes mounted in the corners. Security cameras. How many were there? How long had they been running? And who had access? My chest tightened. If he had partners, if there was debt, then ownership wasn't simple. It was entanglement. I walked back into the glass office and opened the financial spreadsheet again. I searched for loan entries. There, buried. Lines labeled equipment financing, private capital infusion. My heart pounded. I clicked one. The lender name wasn't a bank. It was an LLC I didn't recognize. No website, no details, just initials. RK Holdings. My phone buzzed again. Text message. Unknown number. You have 72 hours to decide. My breath hitched. Decide what? Another message followed. Either you take control and honor the commitments. A pause. Then the next one came through. Or we liquidate. Liquidate. The word felt sharp. Final. I stared at the warehouse around me, my father's voice still echoing in memory. I left you leverage, but leverage works both ways, and now I understood something chilling. He hadn't just built this for me, he'd positioned me, at the center of something already in motion. I walked slowly toward the large warehouse door and looked out at the empty street. It didn't feel empty anymore. It felt watched, calculated, timed. I thought about my corporate job, my safe salary, my predictable life, and this was volatile, massive, risky, and possibly dangerous. I looked back at the hidden door, at the observation file still lying on the floor. Had he watched me because he cared, or because he needed to be sure I was capable, or because someone else required updates? My phone buzzed one more time. Final message. Welcome to Carter Supply, Emerson. I didn't know whether that was a greeting or a warning, and standing there in that middle of that spotless warehouse my parents left me, I realized something. Walking inside was the easy part. Walking away might not be an option.
I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the cold concrete floor of that warehouse, my back against the wall of the hidden office, staring at the metal lockbacks like it was breathing. It felt alive. Every sound outside made me flinch. A car passing, wind pushing against the loose sheet metal, the distant wail of a siren somewhere in the city. I kept hearing my mother's voice in my head. Not everything we build is meant to be seen. At the time, I thought she was talking about resilience, or grief, or marriage. Now I wasn't so sure. The sun started bleeding through the cracked windows around 6 in the morning, pale, dusty light. I finally opened the lockbox. Inside were 3 things: a thick stack of legal documents, a USB drive, and a handwritten letter with my name on it. My hands were shaking so hard I had to sit back down before opening the letter. It was my father's handwriting, messy, slanted, rushed. If you're reading this, then you came looking. That line alone made my chest tighten. He knew. He knew I wouldn't just sell it. He knew I'd walk inside. He knew I'd dig. He wrote about the warehouse like it was a living thing, said it wasn't a burden, it was a vault. He said the business they told everyone had failed years ago didn't fail. It was bought, quietly, strategically, through shell companies and silent investors. And the warehouse? It was the original holding location for something much bigger. I felt my stomach drop as I flipped through the legal documents, stock certificates, equity transfers, trust agreements, all in my name, all activated the moment both of them passed. They hadn't left me a run-down warehouse. They had left me control of a logistics company that had quietly grown over 2 decades into something massive: warehousing, distribution contracts, regional shipping lanes, companies I recognized, companies that were suddenly connected to me. My phone buzzed. I nearly dropped it. Unknown number. I stared at it for a full 10 seconds before answering. Hello? A calm male voice, controlled, professional. Is this Miss Carter? Yes. This is Daniel Reeves. I represent the board of Halberg Distribution. My heart skipped. Halberg, one of the names in the documents. We've been expecting your call, he said. I didn't call you. A pause. No, he replied evenly, but we knew you would find the paperwork. The air felt too thin. What is this? I whispered. It's succession, he said. Your parents retained majority silent ownership. Upon their passing, that ownership transfers to you. Silence swallowed me. Effective immediately, he continued, you are the controlling stakeholder. I let out a small, broken laugh. You're telling me I own Halberg Distribution? Yes. I thought about the warehouse's peeling paint, the cracked glass, the dust. You let that building rot. It was camouflage. The word sent a chill through me. Camouflage. "So, what now?" I asked. "Now," he said calmly, "you decide." After I hung up, I just sat there. Me, the girl who struggled with rent 2 years ago, the girl whose relatives whispered that my parents failed in business, the girl who almost sold this place for cash because she thought it was useless. I walked out into the main floor of the warehouse. Morning light made it look different, less abandoned, more waiting. I started noticing things I hadn't before. The reinforced beams, the updated security panel hidden behind a rusted cover, the newer electrical wiring disguised to look old. It had never been broken, it had been hidden. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my aunt. The same aunt who told me 2 weeks ago, "Just sell it and move on, sweetheart. There's nothing there." I let it ring. Then she texted, "Call me ASAP. We need to talk about the warehouse." I smiled slowly. "Oh, now we do?" I typed back, "What about it?" 3 dots appeared instantly. Someone mentioned it might be worth more than we thought. I stared at the screen. Someone mentioned. So the news was already leaking. I imagined the board realizing paperwork had been accessed, investors talking, lawyers shifting. The camouflage was fading. I called Daniel back. "Who else knows?" I asked. "Only those who need to, but word travels." I walked toward the large metal back door, the one I hadn't opened yet. My hand hovered over the handle. "What's behind this door?" I asked him. A slight pause. "Your parents believed you would open that when you were ready." That wasn't an answer. I pulled the door open. Sunlight flooded in, and beyond it, trucks. Dozens of them, parked in a massive lot I didn't even know belonged to this property. Branded, operational, moving. Men and women in uniforms loading cargo, activity, life. I stepped outside slowly. One of the drivers looked up at me. Recognition flickered across his face. He walked over, removing his cap respectfully. "You must be her," he said. "Her?" "Miss Carter." I swallowed. "Yes." He nodded once. "Your dad was a good man." The words hit harder than I expected. He used to walk this lot every Friday, said he was building something for the future. My throat tightened. "For who?" I asked softly. The driver smiled slightly. "For you." I stood there surrounded by engines humming, cargo doors clamming, radios crackling. All this time, I thought they left me with nothing. They left me with everything. Not just money, not just ownership, but trust. Trust that I would see past the rest, that I would look deeper, that I wouldn't run. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my aunt, the same aunt who told me 2 weeks ago, "Just sell it and move on, sweetheart. There's nothing there." I let it ring. Then she texted, "Call me ASAP. We need to talk about the warehouse." I smiled slowly. "Oh, now we do?" I typed back, "What about it?" 3 dots appeared instantly. Someone mentioned it might be worth more than we thought. I stared at the screen. Someone mentioned. So the news was already leaking. I imagined the board realizing paperwork had been accessed, investors talking, lawyers shifting. The camouflage was fading. I called Daniel back. "Who else knows?" I asked. "Only those who need to, but word travels." I walked toward the large metal back door, the one I hadn't opened yet. My hand hovered over the handle. "What's behind this door?" I asked him. A slight pause. "Your parents believed you would open that when you were ready." That wasn't an answer. I pulled the door open. Sunlight flooded in, and beyond it, trucks. Dozens of them, parked in a massive lot I didn't even know belonged to this property. Branded, operational, moving. Men and women in uniforms loading cargo, activity, life. I stepped outside slowly. One of the drivers looked up at me. Recognition flickered across his face. He walked over, removing his cap respectfully. "You must be her," he said. "Her?" "Miss Carter." I swallowed. "Yes." He nodded once. "Your dad was a good man." The words hit harder than I expected. He used to walk this lot every Friday, said he was building something for the future. My throat tightened. For who? I asked softly. The driver smiled slightly. For you. I stood there surrounded by engines humming, cargo doors clamming, radios crackling. All this time, I thought they left me with nothing. They left me with everything. Not just money, not just ownership, but trust. Trust that I would see past the rest, that I would look deeper, that I wouldn't run. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my aunt, the same aunt who told me 2 weeks ago, "Just sell it and move on, sweetheart, there's nothing there." I let it ring. Then she texted, "Call me ASAP, we need to talk about the warehouse." I smiled slowly. "Oh, now we do?" I typed back, "What about it?" 3 dots appeared instantly. Someone mentioned it might be worth more than we thought. I stared at the screen. Someone mentioned. So the news was already leaking. I imagined the board realizing paperwork had been accessed, investors talking, lawyers shifting. The camouflage was fading. I called Daniel back. "Who else knows?" I asked. "Only those who need to, but word travels." I walked toward the large metal back door, the one I hadn't opened yet. My hand hovered over the handle. "What's behind this door?" I asked him. A slight pause. "Your parents believed you would open that when you were ready." That wasn't an answer. I pulled the door open. Sunlight flooded in, and beyond it, trucks, dozens of them, parked in a massive lot I didn't even know belonged to this property. Branded, operational, moving. Men and women in uniforms loading cargo, activity, life. I stepped outside slowly. One of the drivers looked up at me. Recognition flickered across his face. He walked over, removing his cap respectfully. "You must be her," he said. "Her?" "Miss Carter." I swallowed. "Yes." He nodded.